Okay, here's me, here's Artie, and here's our soul.
Yes.
All souls are one in the ultimate reality. Okay? So, without the soul, if we saw perfection in each other, we could have a circulation of soul energy. And that would feel really great. And we may be totally wrong for each other. Okay? But the soul will also recognize when you are right for each other. And if you are right for each other, it will add an additional downflow of energy to create a triangle of energy, which is more powerful still. And when you have the triangle circulating, then you will have the feeling this is right. Okay? Now when you just have the energy circulating between you two, then you will have a really good feeling, but you may have a sense, feels really good, but something's not right about it.
And it ends.
Yeah.
Which is the mental construct cut off from your spirit.
Yeah. Like, I remember before I ever got married, I met this gal that I was really attracted to. And when we dated, there was no barriers, and there was great energy shared. We both felt really wonderful in each other's presence. But then I kept having this nagging feeling that I wasn't supposed to marry her. And it just wouldn't go away. And then it bothered her too. She had the same. She finally came to me one day and she said, "You know, I prayed about you and God told me I'm not supposed to marry you." And I thought, well, I've known that all along, I said, but I just been trying to ignore it. But she got a really definite answer from her soul, and she kind of gave me a wake-up call, and I went along with it. But we had really nice sharing. But then later, in say my relationship with Artie, then the soul, the energy circulates in a triangle, and then there's a feeling that's more powerful still. It's amplified, the energy circulates, and you know that person is right for you. Yeah.
Back to, you were talking about you could reconnect. If you had built up all these barriers,
Yeah.
if you could just remove them, then you could see that perfection in each other again. And my first question was, how do you get some permanence there? Because, I mean, if you see perfection for 30 seconds and then it's gone again, so is it when that soul, when that triangular flow of energy and the soul is involved, then?
What Artie tried to do, and I posted this on the list before, is contrary to popular belief. I know you think that we get along just famously all the time. We have our little arguments every now and then. And sometimes we'll get pretty intense, and when it happens, one of us will think, well, this has gone far as we want to go. We need to reestablish the contact. So we have a place, a table that we sit down. And the one in contact with soul energy drags the other person to the table. And we sit down and we look at each other and we have a deal that we'll look in each other's eyes and say, "I love you" 3 times. And usually by the 3rd time, unless we've had a real heated argument.
Sometimes it takes 30 times.
Like sometimes I'll say to her, "Okay, you gotta say I love you," and she'll say, "I love you." I say, "Well, that doesn't sound like I love you." Say it like you really mean it. To make this work, you gotta say it like you really mean it. "I love you." No, that doesn't sound like. It has to sound 3 times like you really mean it when we do it with each other. And when we say it by the 3rd time, sounding like we really mean it, even though we don't the first time or 2. We really feel like I hate you. But by the 3rd time, what happens about the 3rd time, then?
Sparks.
Usually?
We melt.
Yeah. It's a melting.
Yeah.
It's a surrender.
Dissolve.
Dissolving the barriers. Okay, but
One more layer off.
while we're still on the barrier thing, how do we know that this barrier that we've created with that person is just a barrier and can be removed? Let's take drinking alcohol, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this person drinking alcohol, so I can create that to be a barrier when it's not. Or it really is something that's a barrier or something that's telling me not to stay with this person. I need to get out. How do I know it's a barrier to be removed or an inspiration for me to be removed?
Okay, if it's time to move on with that person, if you have soul contact, you'll feel inner communication from your soul that it's time to move on. If you're supposed to stay with that person, even though there's a lot of problems, you should feel the feeling like, well, I'm supposed to stay in this and try to work it out. If you feel that feeling, then the thing to do is to make it as close to soul contact with the other person as you can, to remove the barriers. But if the person, for instance, is beyond redemption, he's an alcoholic, and you come to the conclusion the only thing to do is to move on, then move on. Don't delay, just move on. I mean, that would be the best thing for him, probably. But if, even though oftentimes a relationship may be difficult, but you have something really important to learn from that relationship, and your soul will want you to stay in it, because you've gone into that experience, and as long as you're there, you might as well learn from it. And so, the thing to do then is to remove the barriers. And if the other person refuses to remove barriers with you, it's important that you still remove your barriers with him. Because when you remove your barriers, your love energy will be very stimulating to him or her. And sometimes it'll make them worse for a period of time. Because if you send love and it's not given back, the person will actually become very agitated quite often and become more abusive. But don't let that stop you. Continue to be harmless. Continue to remove your barriers to the soul. Continue to be open. And what he'll do to the person, it'll either make him self-destruct. It sounds like you've been through that. It'll either make the person self-destruct, or else he'll change. But he won't stay the same. He'll either change for the better or get worse.
Or he'll run
But
away.
But
Or he'll run from that.
yeah,
Yeah, it gives you a choice point. So the person will say, I am not going to change, and you know where you stand, in a sense. You get a choice point then.
I think that was up to Madeline and Robin. Their marriage is not to run away from knowledge. And that was the one lesson I truly learned. And we can reasonably stay together. But she didn't tell you, but when we met, she called the mother the next day and said she had found a man she would marry.
Neither of us had been married before, and we were both a little older.
and the funny thing is, no matter how perfect your relationship starts out, you're going to have things to work out. Because you'll see perfection when you have that falling in love feeling, especially if it's a fast romance. You won't see anything wrong with it. The person can do no wrong, but then eventually you'll have a lot of data implanted in your mind about his habits, what he does. He's not appreciative enough, he's not this enough, and all these things are floating around your mind. They create barriers. You have to just sit down, remove the barriers, find them in you, remove them, and use the I love you thing or whatever, so that you sit down with each other and you see perfection in each other.
So, JJ, would it be true to say then that if I were a perfect person, but if I were a perfect person, I would be able to love without barriers people then? People in this room, people on the streets, people around me. I would have discernment so that I don't get myself in trouble, of course. But I mean, my parents, my sisters, my cousins, my people in my life, people on the net, things like that. I would be able to remove the barriers with them and be like walking around in love all the time.
Well, you're thinking romantic love, for instance. Spiritual love, romantic love are two different things. You have
Spiritual love.
one unit of romantic energy. If you're in love with two people at the same time, each person gets 50% of their energy. You both get half of it. Okay, if you're trying to share it. Spiritual love,
64.
60.
spiritual love is different. Spiritual love, you can go, it's unlimited.
Forever, yeah.
I can spiritually love all of you guys here 100%. But I can only romantically love with 100% of my romantic energy one person. If I try to romantically love two people, then that 100% of energy is divided. Say person A gets 60%, person B gets 40%. So romantic energy is entirely different things. You just got one unit of it. And so this is why 100% commitment is important with romantic energy, is to keep the energy there. And then I think we'll talk about that after our next break. But before we have the next break, let's do a little experiment with the sharing of spiritual love. What we will do is have each one of us go to each person in this group and we'll say these words. I love you through the soul with the pure love of Christ. Okay? I love you through the soul with the pure love of Christ.
I'm sorry, 6.
I love you through the soul with the pure love of Christ.
I love you through the soul
With the pure love of Christ.
with the pure love of Christ.
And look in the other person's eyes, and then have that other person say that back to you, and then give that person a hug, and then we'll move on to the other person. And every person here has to do it with every single person in this room.
If you do it back when the person comes through, you will.
What?
If Artie does it to every person in the room and every person does it back to Artie, then that's it.
Then the soul is engaged.
Okay. Well, we're going to do it with people besides Artie, though. We're going to do it with everybody.
You gotta do it with Xavier too.
Okay, Lorraine, you can start with me. Because Lorraine and all, sorry, here. Okay. No,
You're supposed to.
Okay.
I love you through the soul with the pure love of Christ.
And call the other person by name, by the way. Lorraine, I love you through the soul with the pure love of Christ.
Now I can hug.
Okay. And then move on to the next person.
So we're all gonna keep doing it simultaneously, right?
Yeah, everybody get up and do that till
We'll have to make it
everybody
simple.
keep track. Make sure you've done everybody in the
Can't
room.
move too much.